bullet that changed everything came at dawn. Maddie Ross found her father face down in the Arkansas mud, blood mixing with river water. His dreams of building something lasting in this godforsaken territory, dying with him in the dirt. Tom Chaney had put 2 rounds in his back and ridden off with 300 head of cattle, like her father's life meant nothing at all. She was 19. Beautiful in that dangerous way frontier women got when they stopped caring what men thought of them. Dark hair that caught sunlight like copper wire. Eyes that could cut through a man's lies faster than his blade could find flesh. Her body had the kind of curves that made cowboys forget their prayers, but her heart held ice cold enough to freeze hell itself. The law wouldn't cross into Indian territory. Her family wouldn't let a woman seek justice. The whole damn world expected her to weep pretty and move on. But Maddie Ross had never been the kind to take no for an answer. What happens when a woman decides she'd rather die free than live caged? And if you're enjoying this story of the untamed West, hit that like button and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Now, let's see how far Maddie was willing to go. She found Rooster Cogburn in the worst saloon in Fort Smith, drinking whiskey that could strip paint and playing cards with men who'd kill you for looking at their hand wrong. He was 48 years old and looked like 60. Gray-bearded, one-eyed, with hands that had pulled triggers on more men than he cared to count. His reputation preceded him like smoke before fire. They said he'd killed 14 men in 4 years as a U.S. Marshal. They said he shot first and asked questions at the funeral. "I need you to find Tom Chaney," Maddie said, sliding a bag of silver dollars across the table. Cogburn didn't look up from his cards. "Little girl, this ain't no place for—" "I'm not a little girl." Her voice cut through the saloon noise like a whip crack. "I'm a woman with money and a dead father. Which one interests you more?" Now he looked. His one good eye traveled from her face down the length of her body, the way her dress hugged her waist, the rise and fall of her chest when she breathed hard from anger. The other men at the table leaned back, sensing something electric in the air. "Tom Chaney killed Frank Ross 3 days ago," she continued, "took our cattle and rode for Indian territory. The local sheriff won't pursue, says it's federal business." "Smart sheriff." Cogburn knocked back his whiskey. "Indian territory will eat you alive, girl. Full of killers, savages, and worse things than Tom Chaney. Then you're perfect for it." Something flickered in his eye. Amusement, maybe, or respect. "You got steel in you. I'll give you that. But hunting men ain't work for ladies. My father taught me to shoot before I could properly read." She opened her coat just enough to show the Colt .45 holstered at her hip. "And I read just fine." The saloon had gone quiet. Men were staring now, some with hunger, some with worry. An armed woman in 1878 was more dangerous than dynamite. Cogburn studied her face. Something in those dark eyes reminded him of his daughter Sarah, dead 2 winters past from the influenza. Same stubborn set to the jaw, same fire that wouldn't be snuffed out easy. $100, he said finally, plus expenses, and you do exactly what I tell you, when I tell you. 50 now, 50 when Chaney's dead, 75, and we bring him back alive for trial. Dead works just fine for me." Cogburn smiled then, showing teeth yellow as old bone. "Lady, you might just survive this after all." But as she counted out the silver, neither of them saw the shadow that detached itself from the saloon wall and slipped out into the night. Word traveled fast in border towns. By morning, Tom Chaney would know someone was coming for him, and he'd be ready. What Maddie didn't know was that the marshal she'd just hired carried demons darker than any she could imagine. Demons that would either save them both or damn them together. They rode out at first light, crossing the Arkansas River on a ferry that groaned under the weight of their horses and supplies. Maddie had traded her dress for men's clothing, denim pants that outlined every curve of her legs, a cotton shirt that did nothing to hide the swell of her breasts. Cogburn tried not to notice. Failed. "You change your mind about this. We can turn back," he said, as Indian territory spread before them like a green promise of violence. "I don't change my mind about anything, Marshal." The land was beautiful and brutal. Rolling hills covered in oak and pine, streams that ran clear as glass, and somewhere in all that wilderness, men who'd kill you for your boots. They made camp that first night beside a creek that caught moonlight like scattered silver coins. Maddie watched Cogburn care for the horses with surprising gentleness. His hands, scarred and calloused from violence, moved soft as prayer over the animals' flanks. "You had family?" she asked. "Once." He didn't look at her. "Wife. Daughter." "What happened?" "Influenza took them both." His voice carried the weight of years. "Should have been me instead." She moved closer to the fire, close enough that he could smell her, soap and leather and something indefinably feminine that made his chest tight. "My father said the hardest thing about losing someone is learning to live with the space they leave behind." "Your father was a wise man. Wise enough to teach his daughter how to survive in a man's world." She met his eye across the flames. Even if it meant she'd have to become something men couldn't control. The way she said it, low and husky, made something stir in his belly that had been quiet for too long. She was beautiful in the firelight, dangerous as a loaded gun, and young enough to be his daughter. Everything about wanting her was wrong. Everything about wanting her felt inevitable. "We should get some sleep," he said, turning away, before his thoughts could wander further down that dark road. But as he lay in his bedroll that night, listening to her breathe in the darkness, Rooster Cogburn knew he was in more trouble than Tom Chaney could ever present. The girl had gotten under his skin like a splinter, and the more he tried to ignore it, the deeper it worked its way toward his heart. 3 days deeper into the territory, they found the first bodies. 2 cowboys, scalped and stripped, left for the buzzards near a waterhole. Their horses were gone. So were their guns. "Comanche?" Maddie asked, trying to keep the tremor out of her voice. "Maybe. Or someone wants us to think Comanche." Cogburn studied the tracks around the bodies. These men were shot, not killed with arrows. And look here, the killer wore boots, not moccasins. Tom Chaney? Could be. Or his friends. He straightened, scanning the surrounding hills. Either way, we're being watched. As if to prove his point, a rifle cracked from the ridgeline. The bullet whined past Maddie's ear, close enough to part her hair. Cogburn tackled her to the ground, his body covering hers, one hand instinctively protecting her head. For a moment they lay pressed together, her soft curves against his hard chest, her breath warm on his neck. He could feel her heart hammering against his ribs, could smell the fear sweat mixed with that maddening feminine scent that made him want to bury his face in her hair and forget there were men trying to kill them. "We need cover," he breathed against her ear. They low-crawled to a fallen log as more shots peppered the ground around them. Cogburn drew his Colt and fired back, not aiming to hit, but to keep the shooter honest. "How many?" Maddie whispered. "At least 3. Maybe more." She pulled her own gun, and he noticed her hands were steady as stone. Whatever fear she felt, she kept it locked down tight. "What's the play?" Cogburn looked at this slip of a girl who faced death like she was born for it, and felt something shift in his chest. Something that had nothing to do with lust and everything to do with the way she said, "we," like they were partners in this dance. Like maybe, for the first time in years, he wasn't alone, but surrounded by killers in the heart of Indian Territory, with Tom Cheney somewhere ahead and enemies closing in behind. Partnership might not be enough to keep them alive. They escaped the ambush by riding hard through a thunderstorm that turned the world into a chaos of lightning and mud, found shelter in a cave that smelled of old campfires and desperate men. Maddie was soaked through, her shirt clinging to her skin like a second layer, and Cogburn had to force himself to look anywhere but at the way the fabric outlined every curve of her body. "You're shivering," he said, building a fire from dry wood cached in the cave's depths. "I'm fine." But she wasn't fine. Her lips were blue, her whole body trembling from cold and shock. Without thinking, Cogburn shrugged out of his coat and wrapped it around her shoulders. "Here." The coat smelled like him, gunpowder and tobacco and something deeper, more masculine. She pulled it tighter, breathing in his scent, and felt something flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with the cold. "Thank you." They sat close to the fire, close enough that their knees almost touched. The storm raged outside, like the end of the world, but inside the cave, with the firelight dancing across her face, Maddie looked like something from a fever dream. "Tell me about your wife," she said quietly. "Mary." His voice went soft. "Met her at a church social in Missouri, before the war." She had the prettiest laugh. "Could make me smile, just by walking in a room." "Did you love her?" "Course I loved her. Married her, didn't I?" "That's not the same thing." He looked at her then. Really looked. "What makes you think it ain't?" "Because I've seen the way men look at me. And I've seen the way you look at me. And they're not the same thing at all." The words hung between them like smoke. Cogburn felt his pulse quicken, felt the weight of every boundary they'd been dancing around since Fort Smith. "Maddie, I'm not a child, Marshall. I know what desire looks like." She was right. God help him. She was right. The way he wanted her was nothing like the gentle affection he had felt for Mary. This was hungrier, darker, the kind of wanting that got men killed and women ruined. "You don't know what you're saying." "Don't I?" She leaned closer, close enough that he could see the gold flecks in her dark eyes. "Don't I know that you think about me at night? Don't I know that every time you look at me, you have to remind yourself why you shouldn't touch me?" His hand moved without conscious thought, fingers tracing the line of her jaw. Her skin was silk-soft and fever-warm. She leaned into his touch like a cat seeking warmth. "This is a mistake," he whispered. "Everything worthwhile is." He kissed her then, unable to stop himself. She tasted like rainwater and danger, like everything he'd sworn he didn't need anymore. Her mouth opened under his, hungry and demanding. And when her tongue touched his, he felt something break loose in his chest. His hands found the buttons of her shirt, fingers fumbling with the wet fabric. She helped him, pulling the cotton away from her skin, and when he saw her, really saw her, firelight painting gold across the curves of her breasts, her dark hair spilling over one shoulder, he felt like a man dying of thirst who just found water. "Jesus, Maddie." She reached for the buckle of his gun belt, her fingers sure and steady despite the way her hands trembled. The leather fell away with a soft thud. Then she was working at the buttons of his shirt, pushing the fabric aside to run her palms across his chest. He caught her hands, stilling them against his skin. "If we do this, there's no going back. You understand that?" "I don't want to go back." He lifted her then, carrying her deeper into the cave where his bedroll waited, laid her down gentle as handling something precious and breakable. The firelight turned her skin to honey, caught the wild tangle of her hair, and when she reached for him, Cogburn felt years of loneliness crack like ice in spring. But as his mouth found the hollow of her throat, as her breath caught and her back arched beneath him, a sound echoed from the cave mouth that froze them both. Horses, moving slow and careful through the rain. Cogburn rolled away from her, grabbing his gun in one smooth motion. Get dressed. Now. They dressed in frantic silence, every rustle of fabric loud as thunder. Cogburn doused the fire with dirt, plunging them into darkness just as voices reached them from outside. Saw smoke. Could be them. Tom wants them alive. The girl, anyway. Maddie's blood turned to ice. They'd been found. And somewhere in the darkness beyond the cave, Tom Chaney was waiting with a patience that promised nothing but pain. They slipped out the back of the cave like ghosts, leading their horses through the maze of rocks and trees that surrounded the hideout. But Chaney's men knew the territory better. By sunrise, they were surrounded. The ambush came at a creek crossing, bullets singing through the morning air like deadly music. Cogburn's horse screamed and went down hard, throwing him into the rocky stream. Maddie dove for cover behind a fallen log as wood exploded around her head. Give up the girl, Marshal. The voice carried across the water, rough as gravel and twice as cold. Tom Chaney's got business with her. Cogburn army crawled to where Maddie crouched, blood streaming from a gash on his forehead. How many you count? 6, maybe 7. She checked her ammunition with practiced efficiency. We're outnumbered. Story of my life. He smiled grimly. You remember what I taught you about shooting? Aim center mass. Fire twice. Don't think about it being a man. Good girl. But she wasn't a girl anymore, and they both knew it. What had almost happened in the cave had changed something between them, made the air electric with unfinished business and the promise of things that might never be. The attack came from 3 sides at once. Maddie put 2 rounds into the first man who broke cover, watching him spin and fall like a broken doll. The sight should have sickened her. Instead, she felt a cold satisfaction that scared her more than the bullets. Cogburn fought like a man possessed, his colt barking death across the creek. But there were too many of them, and their ammunition wouldn't last forever. Maddie! His voice cracked like a whip. When I say run, you head for those rocks uphill. Don't look back. Don't wait for me. I'm not leaving you. God damn it, girl, this ain't the time for... A rifle bullet took him high in the shoulder, spinning him around and dropping him to one knee. Blood soaked his shirt in a spreading stain. That's when Tom Chaney stepped out of the trees. He was smaller than Maddie had imagined, ordinary looking, with thinning hair, and the kind of face you'd forget 5 minutes after meeting. But his eyes held the flat, dead look of a snake, and the gun in his hand never wavered. Maddie Ross, he said, like greeting an old friend. You've caused me considerable trouble. She kept her gun trained on his chest, though her hands shook with rage and adrenaline. You killed my father. Your father was fixing to shoot me. I defended myself. You shot him in the back. Chaney shrugged. Man turns his back on trouble. That's his lookout. The casual cruelty of it hit her like a physical blow. This nothing little man had ended her father's life and thought no more of it than swatting a fly. You're going to pay for what you did. Am I now? He smiled, showing tobacco-stained teeth. See, I don't think so. I think you're going to drop that gun and come along peaceful-like. Because if you don't, my boys are going to do things to you that'll make you wish your daddy had never been born. Cogburn struggled to his feet, his good arm hanging useless. Touch her, and I'll kill you slow. You ain't in much position to threaten anybody, old man. That's when Maddie saw her chance. Cheney's attention was on Cogburn, his gun wavering between them. She didn't think about it, didn't hesitate, just pulled the trigger. The bullet took him center chest, punching through his heart like it was paper. He looked down at the spreading red with something like surprise, then toppled backward into the creek. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the birds had stopped singing. Maddie stared at the body floating in the red-stained water and felt nothing. No satisfaction, no relief, just a hollow emptiness where her rage had been. "It's done," Cogburn said quietly. "Yeah, it's done." But it wasn't. Not really. Because killing Tom Cheney hadn't brought her father back, hadn't filled the hole in her heart or answered the questions that kept her awake at night. It had just made her a killer, same as the man floating dead in the stream. The remaining outlaws had scattered when their leader fell. Cowards, all of them. Brave only when the odds were in their favor. Cogburn was hurt bad, losing blood faster than he could afford. Maddie helped him onto her horse, climbing up behind him, her arms around his waist to keep him in the saddle. "We need to get you to a doctor. There's a settlement 2 days north. Swedish farmers. They'll patch me up." They rode in silence, her body pressed against his back, feeling the steady rhythm of his breathing. The intimacy of it was almost unbearable after what had passed between them in the cave. "Rooster?" "Yeah." "What happens now?" He was quiet for so long she thought he hadn't heard. Then, "Now we figure out how to live with what we've done. But some choices once made change you forever." And as they rode toward an uncertain future, both of them wondered if redemption was possible for people like them. They made it to the settlement with Cogburn, more dead than alive, his blood painting a trail across her saddle. The Swedish doctor worked through the night, pulling the bullet from deep muscle and stitching the torn flesh back together with thread fine as spider silk. Maddie never left his side. When he finally woke 3 days later, she was sitting by the window, watching the sunset over the endless prairie grass. "You stayed. Where else would I go?" He tried to sit up, winced, settled back against the pillows. "You could go home. Live a normal life, find a husband, have children." She turned from the window, and he saw something in her eyes he'd never seen before. Peace, maybe, or acceptance. "I tried normal once. It didn't suit me." "Maddie, I bought some land north of here. Good water, decent soil. Needs a man who knows how to work it." She smiled, and for the first time since her father's death, it reached her eyes. "Interested in a partnership, Marshall?" He looked at her, this dangerous, beautiful woman who'd killed a man, and nursed him back to life in the same week, and felt something settle in his chest, something that might have been hope. "Reckon I could be persuaded." Outside, the wind moved through the grass like whispered promises, carrying the scent of sage and possibility. They'd both lost pieces of themselves in the territory. Innocence, certainty, the simple belief that justice could heal what was broken. But they'd found something else, something worth building on, something worth staying for. If this story moved you like it moved me, give it a like and let me know in the comments where you're listening from. The American West is full of legends, some true, some not. But the best ones? They're about people who refuse to let the world break them. Thanks for riding along.